It is Sunday the 16th of October 2016 and I'm in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. I'm just starting up my alternative spiritual practice of protesting against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses and hypocrisy. And we're looking at the so-called wayside pulpit of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. Basically the Unitarian Church of Montreal's church sign, where they put up various sayings and slogans and so on. And I'm quite sure that what we're looking at right now is the mission statement of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, which says, "Our spiritual community welcomes, nurtures, inspires, challenges. Together we take action in the world." What I find interesting about this mission statement is that it's incredibly vague. It doesn't say what the Unitarian Church of Montreal welcomes. It doesn't say what the Unitarian Church of Montreal nurtures. It doesn't say what the Unitarian Church of Montreal inspires. It doesn't say what the Unitarian Church of Montreal challenges. And it doesn't say what kind of actions Montreal Unitarians take in the world. And the fact of the matter is that this church mission can actually be interpreted in a very negative light. You know, the Unitarian Church of Montreal does in fact welcome intolerant and abusive atheists as members of the church and even as clergy. So they welcome people as members and as ministers who are intolerant towards and abusive towards God-believing people. The Unitarian Church of Montreal nurtures these very same people. In fact, they pay the salaries of abusive clergy, anti-religious bigots like Reverend Ray Drennan. And while I won't go so far as to say that the current minister, Reverend Diane Rollert, is an anti-religious bigot, she is in fact guilty of a variety of unethical, immoral, borderline criminal, and quite possibly even criminal behaviors, specifically perjury being one of them. Reverend Diane Rollert told lies to the police. She told lies in sworn testimony in court. As far as I'm concerned, some of what she said actually constitutes perjury. So we'll go on. It inspires. The Unitarian Church of Montreal inspires. Well, it inspires this protest against anti-religious intolerance and bigotry and clergy abuse and various other Unitarian Universalist injustices and abuses and so on. So basically it inspires a reaction against the immoral, unethical, borderline criminal and so on behavior of Montreal Unitarians. And it challenges my protest for sure. I have a very legitimate protest against the anti-religious intolerance and bigotry that I encountered at the Unitarian Church of Montreal and the associated clergy abuse that is part of that. And I have broadened that protest out to include protest against clergy sexual misconduct, although I'm not personally a victim of sexual misconduct on the part of Unitarian Universalist ministers. As a result of filing complaints about non-clergy sexual misconduct, I became aware of the Unitarian Universalist religious community's lamentable responses to clergy sexual misconduct. And so I have spoken out about not only the misconduct itself, but the fact that the Unitarian Universalist Association in Boston and numerous individual Unitarian Universalist churches essentially protect abusive clergy, whether they're guilty of sexual misconduct or non-sexual misconduct, and very often go after the people complaining about the abuse and the misconduct. So yes, the action that the Unitarian Church of Montreal takes in the world includes a variety of actions that seek to keep me quiet about these issues. They have actually brought false criminal charges against me in the past. I was falsely accused of breaking section 176.3 of the Canadian Criminal Code, which prohibits disrupting the order and solemnity of religious services. So there's a section in the Canadian Criminal Code that prohibits disrupting church services, and outrageously hypocritical and deeply cynical Montreal Unitarians were able to persuade the SPVM to arrest me on that charge, even though my protest takes outside the church, is almost completely invisible from inside the church when there's a service happening, and is pretty well completely inaudible inside the church. Yet they tried to use this law, which is clearly prohibiting the actual disruption of church services, to shut down my protest outside the church. So that's just one immoral, unethical, and in some ways I'd even go so far as to say criminal, in that it's a misuse of the law. It's malicious prosecution and so on. You know, making a false report to the police is a public mischief. It's a criminal act, and Montreal Unitarians, in addition to that occasion, have called in numerous false reports to the SPVM. I've dealt with dozens, if not some hundreds, of SPVM police interventions in my protest since I first began protesting. It's very, very possible that if one adds up all of the times that the SPVM police officers have been called to the Unitarian Church of Montreal to intervene in my protest and so on, that the number exceeds 100. I don't think it goes, you know, beyond 200. But it's very, very possible that it's above 100 police interventions since I began protesting in May 1998. Certainly dozens, certainly, you know, 30, 40, 50, 60, no problem. You know, that's a fact, that there's been that many interventions by the SPVM in this protest, all based on, you know, misleading or outright false complaints brought against me by Montreal Unitarians. So that's, you know, one of the ways that Montreal Unitarians take immoral, unethical, borderline criminal, actually criminal, and yes, I'll say it, evil action in the world. So on that note, we're going to begin walking back and forth with our picket signs. I should note that it's the Sunday after Yom Kippur. Unitarian Universalists do, you know, center religious, you know, Sunday services and so on around Yom Kippur at times. It depends on the congregation, depends on to what extent some of them identify as Jewish. But the fact of the matter is that Reverend Diane Rollert's sermon last Sunday revolved around Yom Kippur. And I think it's high time that Reverend Diane Rollert acknowledged expressly, you know, her own immoral and unethical and borderline criminal and possibly even actual criminal, and to some extent evil actions in the world in terms of how she has responded to my protest against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy. So, oh yeah, here's another way Unitarian Universalists take action in the world. This is not specifically Montreal Unitarians. This is the Unitarian Universalist Association in Boston. But here's one of the ways that Unitarian Universalists take immoral, unethical, borderline criminal actions in the world. Certainly evil action in the world. They misuse blasphemy law to cover up and deny pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers and Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers and Unitarian Universalist lay leaders. So those are the picket signs that I'll be displaying today for the public, amongst others. So we'll get on with it. That's my unsafe sect picket sign down there. Nice big letters. So yeah, we're going to walk back and forth with picket signs, speaking about how Unitarians, oh, did I forget to mention the chalk slogans? Yeah, sidewalk was a bit wet this morning because it rained overnight, but there's some dry spots. So I put down a couple of chalk slogans here. Unitarians cover up sexual abuse of children. 100% true. The false blasphemous libel accusation was an attempt to cover up sexual abuse of children, specifically rape, committed by Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell and also by Richard Buell of First Parish Norwell, in terms of Unitarian Universalist rapists that I'd already blogged about. But because it was a cease and desist demand letter that essentially told me to shut up, you know, in other words, it wasn't just addressing what I'd already said, it was trying to intimidate me into keeping quiet completely about pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers, and to say nothing of Sunday school teachers and so on. So in fact, this misuse of blasphemy law to cover up rape, you know, wasn't just about hiding the Reverend Mac Mitchell case and the Richard Buell case, but essentially sought to silence me completely so I didn't speak about other cases of pedophilia and or rape committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers. You know, they didn't want me speaking about the Stephen Craig Bullite case out in Oregon, where a Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teacher was convicted of raping boys or other sexual abuse of boys, even actually, in terms of what he was actually convicted of, I got to be a little bit careful, because there was actually something like 47 counts brought against him. But in a plea deal, he pleaded guilty to, I think, a comparatively small number of them. But they were serious. The ones that he actually did plead guilty to were very serious. He got a substantial prison term. I believe he's still in prison. One of the things that he did, he adopted a young boy. I believe the adoption began when the boy was something like 11 years old, and proceeded to use him as a sex slave, essentially. He raped him and sodomized him and so on over a period measured in years. And it was only when Stephen Craig Bullite sent his computer into a repair place because it had some kind of defect, and a computer technician found evidence of his sex crimes on the computer files, that he was charged with sex abuse of children, including the rape of his own adopted son. And he was convicted, and to the best of my knowledge, he's still in jail. So that's another case of pedophilia and rape committed by not a Unitarian Universalist minister, but by a Sunday school teacher, someone in a position of trust and authority in a Unitarian Universalist church. So we shall continue walking along here. We got a guy looking at the chalk slogans intently. So the guy stopped and had a good look at the slogan, which says Unitarians misuse blasphemy law to cover up rape. Entirely truthful statement. That became true on Friday, June 1st of 2012, when I received in my email inbox a email from Stikeman Elliott Barristers and Solicitors Litigation Lawyer, Maitre Marc-André Coulombe, which, amongst other things, falsely accused me of the criminal act of blasphemous libel for allegedly, and I do say allegedly, making unfounded and vicious allegations to the effect that ministers of the association engage in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. Well, of course, the key word in that legalistic blather is unfounded. And in fact, my blog posts about Unitarian Universalist rapists were by no means unfounded. They were solidly founded on news reports published in newspapers, and so there was no lack of foundation in what I was saying about Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell or Richard Buell. So from the get-go, the blasphemous libel accusation was false, because it falsely accused me of making unfounded allegations when in fact I was making very truthful allegations. But interestingly enough, when I researched Canada's blasphemy law, it became apparent that even if I had been making false allegations about Unitarian Universalist ministers engaging in pedophilia and rape, well, that might possibly constitute civil libel, ordinary libel that, could be dealt with a civil lawsuit, but it would not actually constitute the criminal act of blasphemous libel, because blasphemous libel is basically blasphemy. It is essentially attacking, whatever is most sacred and holy to a religious community. So the only circumstance under which I could be guilty of the criminal act of blasphemous libel for blogging about Unitarian Universalist pedophiles and rapists in a critical manner is if such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape were actually held to be sacred and holy by the Unitarian Universalist religious community. And to the best of my knowledge, at least not yet, the Unitarian Universalist religious community does not actually hold such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape to be sacred and holy to Unitarian Universalism. So I think on that note, we're going to wrap up this clip, keeping it under the automatic cutoff point at just over 17 minutes, and we'll start a fresh reel. And so far it's been pretty quiet, and we're just going to shut this down and start a new reel.